Whitetails and Agronomy with Wes Steele from DIY Food Plot Pro. Wes has over 25 years experience in commercial ag production, food plots, a Bachelor of Science in Agronomy, and owns and operates a deer hunting outfitter business in western Kentucky. Follow along as Wes discusses proven food plot strategies, habitat enhancements, and how to manage a deer herd to produce higher quality bucks on your farm.
Welcome to episode 7 of Whitetails and Agronomy. I am your host, Wes Steele, and on today's episode, we're going to talk about the food plot analysis that we just received on the Mega Food Plot Trials, and we're also going to go over some questions that I received this week. A little bit of update on what we've been doing. I spent a tremendous amount of time diving into this data from the analysis. This was something that's fairly extensive that we did, that there's so much information when it came back that it's almost hard to get your head wrapped around how much information was in this analysis, and trying to relate this to food plotters and trying to help as many food plotters as what we can. So we spent a tremendous amount of time this week working on that. Also had a roof problem at my lodge, which is where all my deer hunters stay, and it's where any people that come and take the whitetail class that I'm going to offer this next spring, that's where they'll stay as well, or that's one option where they'll stay. And so I had to go get on the roof and fix that problem. We had a pretty good storm come through here last Sunday, and it got pretty wild pretty quick over in there. Something that's really exciting that I've been doing here lately is pulling pigweeds out of food plots. So that's something that's really been enjoyable. Took the girls out there yesterday afternoon and we pulled pigweeds for about an hour and a half and got over quite a bit of ground. They're not a tremendous amount of them out there, but the few that are an issue. I hate pigweeds with a passion, and I always strongly teach and help folks and tell them to pull up their weeds that are resistant to Roundup or 2,4-D or whatever. And you can see that I also practice what I preach. So I'm out there getting these pigweeds out before they go to seed. So each one of the pigweeds that I was pulling up is Roundup resistant. We've not sprayed those plots with anything other than a pre-emergent herbicide, but I know from past history with this field that those pigweeds are resistant to Roundup and 2,4-D. So we went ahead and just pulled them up before they go to seed, because each pigweed will have over 500,000 seeds put down if it matures, right? A crazy high amount. You think you've got a problem when you've got 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 out there. Wait 2 or 3 years and don't do anything with those pigweeds, and it just turns into a significant amount of pigweeds that are out there, and they will really overtake a field. So I have got into the practice of the few pigweeds that I see out there, I'm making teetotal enemies out of them, and I'm going out there and I'm killing every single one of them that I find. The plots look amazing right now. I mean, just picture perfect food plots right now. Beautiful. The deer are in them like crazy, seeing tons and tons of evidence of the whitetails eating every single thing in the food plots. So sunflowers and corn, soybeans, cowpeas, lab, even some of the pigweeds I'm seeing where the tops have been bit off by deer. So a very good amount of deer is utilizing these plots every single day, and I'm happy to report that. So as I was out pulling pigweeds yesterday afternoon, somebody was coming down my driveway, and I'm literally 100 feet from this car, and I could hear the car on the gravel drive, but I could not see the car. So I'm very happy with the way that food plot has turned out, because it has got such a good screen around it that whitetails are not even able to see a big SUV going down the driveway, right? You can hear it, but you can't see it. And so if they feel like they're comfortable, they're not nearly as likely to try to run out of that food plot, which is what I want. I want them to spend more time in that food plot. The corn is very close to tasseling, so pretty exciting to see how fast it's growing right now. It's really unbelievable. It seems like it's growing 3 or 4 inches a day. It probably isn't growing that much, but it's growing super duper fast. The sunflowers are about to be at full bloom. I'd say within the next week, they will be at full bloom. Most of them are opening up into a head right now, but you don't see any of that color yet. It's still green down in there, about a week away from being in full bloom. And man, but the few that are early, there are honeybees all over those sunflowers. So it's really been a really beneficial thing for those bees to have those sunflowers out there. And like I said, herbicides have been sprayed on that field whatsoever. I'm pretty proud about that, to be honest with you. And the pigweeds that are a problem would not have been as big a problem had I sprayed the pre-emergent quickly enough. But what I did was I waited a little bit too long, about a week is what I did. And the herbicide that I use, the pre-emergent that I use, is really, really good at pigweeds. But once they're established, or once they're starting to grow and they break in the ground, the pre-emergent won't do anything for them. So the pre-emergent is only to prevent weeds and grass seed from germinating up through there. So I was just a little bit late in my application of doing that. I was trying to let that stretch a little bit further than what I should have, and now I've got pigweeds to deal with. Not a tremendous amount, but 5 in a 1 acre plot is too many, in my opinion. Soybeans, lab, cowpeas are all getting hammered. Spent a lot of time out there yesterday pulling those pigweeds, and I saw a significant amount of pressure on all of these species. The lab is starting to vine very heavily right now, starting to crawl a lot on top of a lot of the sunflowers, on top of a lot of the corn where it meets the corn. Really doing extremely well. I would say the cowpeas, soybeans, and lab, I would say, are close to knee high, and they've pretty much got the whole ground shaded out. So I think we're going to be good once we get this round of pigweeds pulled up. We are at full canopy everywhere else and looking really solid. We're still in that hot, wet pattern that we were in the entire summer. We are getting rain at least every other day, and like the last 4 days, I think we've got maybe an inch a day. So it's just unbelievable the amount of water that we have got. But the food plots do look amazing. But yeah, we're having to mow once every 4 days. So that's getting old, but I'm not going to complain. So I'm happy with water. That promotes good food plots, much less likely to get into EHD. So I'm tickled with the water, not so tickled with mowing the grass. I took a walk in the woods last week for a video idea that will be coming out next week. And it was very apparent that what the deer were feeding on. And I'm not going to spoil that video, but the whole point of that video was to help land managers and habitat folks, more specifically, as to what trees we should hinge cut, what trees we should cut down and treat with herbicide, or what trees we should just cut down and leave to sprout. And so I think that video is going to be really, really helpful. There was a ton of browse pressure inside that woods, which is mind-boggling because, as a lot of folks don't realize, the habitat side is so important. The food plot that has all this killer food plots in it is literally 50 to 75 yards away from this, and it's still getting hammered inside the woods. So a lot of good things growing inside there, and some bad things as well. You'll see those videos if you're watching the YouTube channel. Before we get into the video, I want to talk real quick about food plot seed. These trials that I'm doing, in my opinion, are game changer for food plots, land managers, landowners, deer hunters in general. I think being able to see this analysis that real-time folks do, not universities, I mean, this is real data that is, in my opinion, game changer for food plots, right? Our whole life we've been told that soybeans are phenomenal. They're the best food plot that you could grow for summer protein food sources. And these food plots are going against that, right? They're going against the very grain of that. There's a lot of things in here that are extremely beneficial to whitetails. And I had multiple folks that are close to me and near and dear to me reach out to me and say, do not release that information to the general public before you have your food plot seed company operational, because you're going to have folks, your other competitors and other folks, that are going to switch up their blends to match my data. And I went ahead and I did it anyway because I think it's important for food plotters and land managers to have this data to be able to look at for this fall and especially next spring. But there is a reason why you don't see this much. It's expensive. It's a pain to do this, and it's very time consuming. So with all that being said, if you enjoy this type of content, and I plan to produce a lot more of it, but if you enjoy this content, please consider at least considering us for some of your business in the fall and the spring months with your food plot seed, right? That helps us keep going, helps us make content that is beneficial to you. So if we're making all the content that is releasing all this data, and then all our competitors are releasing blends that we are recommending through this, it's going to make it very difficult for us to continue to do this kind of stuff. So we want to continue doing this. I really want this to be free of charge for folks. I've not put any stipulations on any of this as far as trying to charge people for it. I think this should be free information that should release to the public. But all I ask of that is just for a chance to earn some of your business, not even all of it. If you don't want to give me all your business, just give me a chance to earn some of it, and I will be grateful for that. And I promise you I will win more of your business in the future through high quality seed and through a great service that you're going to get dealing with DIY Food Plot Pro. Let's get into the meat and potatoes of this podcast and talk about the food plot analysis that we received on the Mega Food Plot trials. So if you're unfamiliar with how YouTube works, it shows us, the creator, many things that behind the scenes that the viewers don't get to see, right? So like, how long does the average viewer watch that video? I get to see that information, not one person specifically, but out of all the people that have watched that video, I got to see how long the average person watched the video. I get to see how many views per hour that video is getting, and then how that video stacks up against the last 10 videos that I've produced. All that information is there for me, along with how good is my thumbnail. So how likely are you, my viewers, to click on that thumbnail to watch the video? So it gives me all this behind the scenes information that a lot of folks are not aware of. And this content clearly resonated with all of you folks, with hunters, with land managers, and landowners, and deer hunters. I mean, this clearly resonated with a ton of you. It was my best video out of my last 10. It had the highest views per hour and the longest watch time per hour. So if you want to encourage YouTube to push my videos out, you can hit the like button, and you can also comment below. Those are two good things that you can do to help these videos push out in the future that YouTube sees as good things, right? The more people that are interacting with that video, the better YouTube thinks it is, and the more people that YouTube will push that out to. But this clearly resonated with a ton of people. I got a lot of views on this video because I think folks are longing for this type of information, new information that is not the same old crap that we hear every single week on Facebook about, food plots or how to set up a stand location or fertilizer or whatever. This is brand new data that we've brought to YouTube, and I think it really resonated well with folks, and I would look for a lot more of that type of content in the future. The corn analysis that we received was shocking, and I say that, let's just talk about the elephant in the room here. NutriCrave was either last or next to last in almost all the different aspects of this trial that we looked at. That's absolutely mind-boggling. I did not expect that whatsoever when we entered into this trial. I really thought NutriCrave would be number one in the majority of these, to be honest with you. I have some speculation as to what the future holds for these trials, and I'll share those with you later, as a listener has submitted a question, and I'll talk about that later on. But I was shocked to see NutriCrave with as low as what it was. The only one that it won was acid detergent fiber, which is the lowest amount of cellulose and lignin in the feed, which is important, don't get me wrong, but I expected to have better results out of the most expensive seed that we have in this by far. I mean, this was over $400 for a 50-pound bag, so extremely, extremely expensive, and so far has got the least amount of results out of any of them. I'm very comfortable saying that it finished last in this trial. So I'm not going to say a clear winner, but 100% NutriCrave finished last or fourth in almost every single one that we had. The worst performing corn to this point. Lowest protein, lowest digestibility, lowest calcium, and lowest megacalories per pound. Only coming in first on acid detergent fiber. So pretty wild. Third place in phosphorus. I said all that to say this, and I've said it on YouTube and I'll say it here on this podcast. This is early in the trial. This is before the corn makes an ear. So we cannot draw any conclusions yet as to what this analysis has told us. This is a piece of the puzzle that we're looking at. This is not the entire puzzle put together and ready to go, and we're okay, now we can pick a hybrid. This is one piece of the puzzle, but it's a fairly important piece because of the amount of deer that are hitting this corn right now. So I think this is likely going to change drastically when this corn matures. I fully expect these levels to change significantly. Now, will there be a clear winner after the corn dries down? I don't know. I can't look into the future like that, but I can say with very high confidence that this will change in the future. So for the podcast listeners only that are not on the YouTube channel, who cares about the corn before it makes an ear? Well, I have got hundreds, maybe thousands of videos and pictures of deer eating this corn, all of these corn, before it put on an ear. So it is a significant part of their diet. And so it is relevant in this food plot analysis that we're talking about. This is relevant information. It's not that we can say, well, it doesn't make any difference. It really does. And I had one viewer reach out and he said, well, NutriCrave says that their corn's not going to be the highest nutrient until it dries down. Well, that's all corn in general. Okay, so the way that works is that kernel of corn is filling with nutrients when it's in the moist stage before it reaches maturity. So if something was to happen to that corn and say it frosts before that process was over with, that is not going to be as nutritious as something that completely finished up. But that's every single corn in this entire trial is in that boat. So there's no difference there, in my opinion, of NutriCrave versus the DIY versus the ag corn. All this is the exact same. We will find that data out later on, but as of right now, all we have is before the ear was put on the plant. We know that NutriCrave was likely in the last place in this trial. The ag corn performed pretty darn well. I was surprised by that. It took home first in total digestible nutrients and megacalories per pound, taking home second in calcium and phosphorus, and only coming in last in protein, 15.9. So the ag corn really did well. And for anybody who has not seen the actual video, the megacalories are how many calories are in a pound of the feed. A megacalorie is 1 million calories. So ag corn had the highest megacalories per pound up to this point, but it also had the lowest protein. So those are two big things that we're looking at this time of the year. At this time of the year, I'm looking for protein and total digestible nutrients. Those are the two that I'm really looking at. Also looking at phosphorus and calcium. The megacalories are, in my opinion, this time of the year are less irrelevant because the whitetails are really consuming a lot of food right now. It's not that they don't have enough food. They are trying to consume a significant amount of food for this fall. So we all have read and heard people talk about on Facebook or other social media platforms that the corn and the soybeans and the wheat that row crop farmers raise has gotten lower and lower in nutritional value. And I think this study pretty much debunks that myth. This corn actually did really, really well compared to the ag corns, compared to the DIY, especially to the NutriCrave. It did very, very well in our trials. The ag corn was also expensive. It was over $300 a bag, so significantly cheaper than NutriCrave, but still pretty expensive and pretty hard on the pocketbook at $300 a bag. The DIY 6539, I think, was the most impressive of all the DIY varieties, and maybe of all in the entire trial. It performed near the top at almost all the aspects we looked at. So it finished first in calcium, second in protein, second in total digestible nutrients, second in the lowest ADF, second in megacalories per pound, only finishing last in phosphorus. But it was still meeting the minimum phosphorus requirement of 0.3. It came in at 0.32. So 6539 was a corn that I have high hopes for anyway. I will fill you guys in on a lot more of that in the future. Why I picked 6539 and why I thought that would be a good wildlife corn for you folks to raise on your farms. And so far, I think it is proving that it does have a place on food plot acreages with as good as it performed in this test to this point. The DIY tillering and non-tillering did what I consider to be middle of the road or average. They did really well in some aspects, and they were finished 4th or 5th in some of the other aspects, right? So the tillering was first in protein at 17.4, which is really impressive. First in phosphorus at 0.38, tied for third in megacalories. So all those pretty dang solid, but tied for fourth in total digestible nutrients, fourth in ADF, and fourth in calcium. So what I consider by that, that's just kind of middle of the road. It won one, and the majority of the rest of them it finished fourth place in. Non-tillering tied for second in total digestible nutrients, got third in protein, calcium, and megacalories per pound, and fourth in phosphorus, and then it got last place in the acid detergent fiber. So from what I've seen so far, I'm pretty happy with the results of my corn, especially with all the corn in the trial, but especially with my corn. That's really what the whole trial is about, to see how this corn stacks up against other varieties, other competitors, and to try to do an unbiased plan here and try to put these all in a trial and to see which one the deer like the most. So one thing that is very significant to mention is the DIY corns. The plan is to have them to market next spring for you guys to be able to purchase. We will be at a significantly lower price than ag corn or NutriCrave. No question about that. It will not even be close. So we are going to be trying to take care of our viewers, of our clients. We are going to come in at a good, solid price to where you can afford to plant this on your land. It's not going to be $400 a bag. I don't have a price yet. I have a roundabout number, but I'm not ready to give that out yet. But it's going to be significantly less than the ag corn or the NutriCrave for sure. Let's get into the legumes and the soybean and legumes and the sunflowers. I'm completely blown away that the sunflowers were as good as what they were. I don't think anybody knew. I don't think there's very many folks that knew that sunflowers would get first in every single aspect that we look at. That is mind-boggling to me. And this kind of goes back to that whole speech that I offered earlier about supporting this channel for doing this research, doing more research like this in the future. There's going to be a mass of products out there with sunflowers in it for the following year. I guarantee you. I bet you my bottom dollar there will be a pile of different products with sunflowers in there because of this data right here. But I was shocked and blown away that sunflowers were as good as what they were. I think they're very highly preferred by whitetails from what I'm seeing. When they start getting the flower on, they seem to lose some of the pull for whitetails. So it's going to be really interesting to see. I've talked to a lot of folks, and I've seen this in real life where as soon as the head comes on, the whitetails just demolish it. And I hope they do. I think that would be a really good thing to see, to witness that. I think there's no question that will be extremely high in nutrients, that head that comes out. That's where all the energy is flowing for a sunflower. So I hope that's the case. And we're going to get into this a little bit later in the video, so I don't want to spoil too much of it. But I think the draw from maybe knee high and up is not quite as much there as it is with some of the other products. I'm just being totally honest here. The soybeans were a complete disappointment. I've heard my entire life how good soybeans are for deer, how high their protein and digestibility are, and we did not see this in this analysis. Soybeans finished last, and I believe every single one of the categories but one. I can't even remember what category that was, but they finished dead last. Lowest protein, lowest digestible nutrients. I mean, megacalories was the lowest in phosphorus. Just staggering how low soybeans did throughout this trial. All the literature that I've read and studied say that soybeans should be up there where cowpeas and lab were, and they were not in this analysis. And I think that's very important why we're doing this trial here. We're not just taking word for word some study that was done 25 years ago for these nutrients. We're looking at real life data here in whitetail country in western Kentucky, and we're trying to decide what we should be planting the following years. I've had a lot of folks speculate and ask, Wes, what do you think the deal is with the soybeans? And I honestly don't have a clue. I really don't. The only thing that makes sense at all, and it doesn't make a significant amount of sense, but it rings true, I believe, is that the soybeans were probably getting browsed harder than any other plot in the early stages of this plot. So they were 100% getting hit harder than the cowpeas and the lab, no question about that, or the corn. So with that all being said, did the cowpeas and lab and sunflowers outcompete that soybean for sunlight? Did they get up taller than the soybean, get more sunlight, be able to get more nutrients through more photosynthesis? I can't say that for sure, but that is a theory that I'm going to work on, that I'm going to look at. I don't know. The soybean plant that I took, it was not the biggest in the field, but it wasn't the smallest in the field either. It was just an average size, and that's what I was looking for across all these plants. I did not try to go find the biggest lab that I could find and rip that plant up, and then go try to find the smallest soybean that I could find and rip that one up. So I tried to kind of take a good average of all these to where we had a very good unbiased view of this. But the soybean that I took was probably a foot tall. It wasn't extremely tall by any means, but it wasn't the shortest in the field, and it wasn't one of the bigger ones either. It was just kind of middle of the road. But that's the only thing that I can kind of make sense of, is maybe the soybeans kind of got outcompeted for sunlight, especially with the sunflowers. No question about that. They outcompeted them. The lab and the cowpeas are significantly bigger as well. I definitely want to try to test that again in the future and see if we can come up with a better, reasonable answer as to why those values were so low. One thing that I thought about earlier, I've since kind of debunked this in my brain, but so the rhizobia bacteria that infect the roots that make the nitrogen for the soybean plant, that process takes pretty good amount of time. You can see the little nodules on the roots. If you ever pull one out of the ground, you have to really dig and be careful not to rip those nodules off. But then you pull that root up out of the ground, and you'll see all these nodules on the ground. And I can tell by the soybeans color that they are not making all the nitrogen that they possibly can right now, which is very common. That's not anything uncommon. As that soybean plant grows and grows, it will get more and more nodules on the roots and provide more nitrogen to that plant. When I thought, well, maybe it just hasn't got as much nitrogen, but you have to think about the cowpeas and the lab. They're in the exact same boat. So they haven't got their bacteria on the roots any more than what the soybeans has. So I think that is null and void by saying that the soybeans haven't put on their nodules yet, or haven't put very many on, and that's why there hasn't been a whole lot of protein involved. The cowpeas and labs are also legumes, so they're going to be in that exact same value. And we did not put any nitrogen on any of the legumes and the sunflowers. So I made very sure that we put nitrogen on the corn and nitrogen on the screening, but we did not try to put any nitrogen on the cowpeas, the lab, or the soybeans. Okay, let's get to our first question. Question number 1. Wes, really enjoyed your food plot analysis video. Do you have any guesses as to what the results will be when corn is finished growing? Yeah, I've got some guesses. Absolutely no hard facts whatsoever. I don't think we are going to be able to guess what's in this trial. I would have never guessed that corn was running, 15.9 to 17.2% protein in the summertime. Would have never guessed that in a million years. So I think there's a lot of aspects of this trial that we absolutely do not know. Now, what am I going to speculate on? I expect NutriCrave to have the highest megacalorie per pound when it finishes growing. Is that going to stack up? I don't know. It didn't stack up the first time, but I expect that to be the case, or there's a lot of bull going on with this marketing. But I suspect that's going to be the case in this. But I also expect some very significant differences in total digestible nutrients. I think there's going to be some significant variances in that department that we're really going to have to focus in on and try to look at as to what corn that we're going to plant. Other than that, I really don't have any idea how this is going to stack up. That's why we're doing this trial, is we're trying to figure out throughout the entire year what's the most nutrient dense, what are the whitetails eating, and why, right? And so that what we can plant on our farms is the most nutrient dense and highly preferred food source that we can get our whitetails. On the legume side of things, I have no idea. I have absolutely no idea how that's going to stack up. I can tell you that I'm very, very excited to see lab and soybeans and sunflowers and cowpeas. They're all going to make seed, hopefully. Hopefully we'll continue getting rain. They all make seed. And then we can dive into that data this winter and try to figure out which ones are being keyed in the fall and the winter time. Because to me, that's just as important, right? I definitely want the summer food sources, but I also want that data for the fall and the winter months. Which one's the most nutrient dense in the fall and winter, and which ones are the whitetails actually eating. So I think that's going to be really exciting to see all these plants out here together in one field where a whitetail can pick through, NutriCrave or 6539 or ag corn or sunflowers or soybeans or cowpeas or lab and try to figure out what whitetails. I'm super excited about this. I don't know if y'all can tell that or not, but this stuff is just nerds me out big time. I love this kind of information, and I think this is so pivotal in the food plot industry that this is being done. Question number 2, how does all this information relate to palatability? That's a great question. And I think the topic deserves quite a bit of conversation here as well, because basically what this question is asking is, why are certain food plots preferred more than others, even if their nutrient analysis may be not as high or maybe lower? And so I think that's exactly what we're trying to learn through this experiment. We're trying to learn why whitetails are eating what they're eating, right? And we're trying to learn what's the most preferred and which one of these food plots is the most nutrient dense. In essence, what this viewer is saying is, let's say we've got a magical bean here that produces 2 times as high as any of the sunflowers, right? But we know the sunflowers blew everything else away in this test. And so let's say that we've got a magical bean here that produces 2 times as high as any of the numbers that sunflowers produced in this analysis. Doesn't make any difference if the deer don't like it or the deer won't eat it. So we have to balance this between the most preferred and the most nutrient dense, right? That's a very big part of this entire process. It has to be both. If the sunflowers are wonderful on the analysis side, but if the deer aren't eating them, they're not good for whitetail food, right? Other side of this is if we've got something that's very, very low in protein and digestibility, the whitetails are absolutely hammering it, well, then that makes a better food plot, right? Because we're at least going to get that draw, maybe not get those nutrients that we had in the sunflowers, but we've got the palatability. So the palatability is how good of a pull does that particular food plot have. So I think in essence here, we have to look at, the highest draw. What food plot is pulling the highest draw? We all know that alfalfas and the soybeans, things like that, have extremely high pull, right? We can plant a small plot of any of those plots that I just mentioned, out in the middle of nowhere, and you are liable to have a good buck show up because of the pulling power of that plot. But we also have to back that up with most nutrient dense food plot when we're trying to manage our entire farm for whitetails. This is much bigger than just protein. This is much bigger than just total digestible nutrients or megacalories per pound. We're trying to fit all this together to make folks have higher quality plots on their farm with more nutrient rich food plots. That's what all this is about. Question number 3. I really enjoyed the food plot analysis in your last video. Very interesting. I noticed that most of the corn was fairly close together in the majority of the categories. So does that mean that there isn't a significant difference between them? Yeah, that's exactly what it means. So, you look at NutriCrave, in ag corn, it's 15.9% protein. And then we look at the DIY blend, and it's 17.4. We look at the other DIY blend at 16.8. There's not a significant difference there, is there? But I think what is very important about that we have to realize is whitetails aren't just eating that corn as part of their diet. So whitetails are going to feed on a variety of things, as I'm going to show in this video that's coming up next week. Woody browse, forbs, food plots. I mean, there's a ton of food out here for these whitetails. They're not just going to eat our food plots. So what does that mean for these numbers? So we think they're eating corn at 15.9%. Let's say we got NutriCrave or ag corn at 15.9%. Well, we're meeting the protein requirement for that whitetail, right? But what we have to think about is all the other feed that whitetail is eating, right? So let's just say, for example, in the late summer, early fall, when the protein levels are dropping. That's a known fact that protein levels are dropping as you get later and later into summer and early fall. So let's just say that a large percentage of that whitetail's diet is 12% protein. And then they're coming to my food plot to eat corn, and that corn is at 15% protein. There's a very good chance that that whitetail is not averaging 15% protein over the entire day of worth of food that he just ate. So likewise, if we had corn that was 18 to 20% protein, and he was still eating that 12% protein for the majority of the day, and then he comes to the food plot and eats 18 to 20% protein corn, it's a much higher likelihood that that deer is going to reach that minimum threshold of 15% because he's consuming a higher number of protein on our end of the things. So I think it all is very important, and it all is very relevant in these numbers. I think, yes, these numbers aren't drastically different, but they are different, right? And for whitetail managers, we're trying to get protein levels as high as we possibly can get them. Even if it's to the point to where the whitetails can't really utilize that much, we still want that high protein available food source available to that whitetail whenever he or she wants it. So I think it's very relevant, very important in that entire process. So with that being said, that's the end of episode 7. I want to thank you guys so much for listening to the podcast. I appreciate each and every one of you. Until next time, y'all keep on food plotting. God bless everybody.